Here we're going to tie a fly called the zoo cougar. This is going to be an unweighted streamer fly pattern meant to be fished on a full sink or heavy sink tip line. First thing we're going to do is just start with a rough thread base. We're going to take our thread here to about the halfway point, and we're going to take a piece of yellow marabou. We're going to tie in a tail that's only about half the length of the shank of the hook. We're going to tie this in right on top of the shank. I want all these fibers to be right on top, so I just draw them up. And I want that tail to be a little more full, so I'm just going to pull off some fibers here. Add those into the tail. I'll add a few more. Just trying to fill out that tail, give it a nice profile. Didn't have quite enough on that one feather. You can use 2 feathers. That'll help fill it out a lot faster than what I just did. There we go. Once we have the tail tied in, we're going to tie in the body material, which is just some pearl diamond braid. And we're going to take our thread forward here. We're going to leave about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of space of bare hook up there by the eye. And we're just going to wrap this braid, build up a little body. Trying to make it as even as possible here. There we go. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the underwing. For that we're going to use a little bit of calf tail and white. We're going to take a clump here that's about 1/4 of the diameter of a pencil or so, not too much. Gotta be careful not to add too much of this material to the fly. And this calf tail really just acts as a prop for the overwing, and we only want it to be about the length of the hook, and we want it to reach back to about halfway behind the tail. We're going to tie this in right on top of the shank of the hook. We can trim out all the butt ends. You still want to make sure you leave a little bit of bare hook up by the eye of the fly. And then we're ready for our overwing, which is going to be a piece of mallard. And I'm going to use a wood duck color here, but you can also use the natural color, especially if you're tying in all white. And we're going to strip off all the fluffy base feathers here of this mallard feather, just exposing the barred feathers. You can see there, they're nice and barred. We're going to tie this on so it reaches back about 3/4 of the way to the tail, to the back of the tail. We don't want it to go all the way back. We want it to stop just a hair short. We're going to tie this right on top of the shank of the hook, right in the middle. It takes a little bit of work in here to get it right centered in the middle. We don't want it really to wobble from either side. There we go. Now we're ready to tie in the collar, which is going to be some yellow deer body hair. And we're going to stack it. We're going to put the tips in and stack it. Trying to get these tips as even as we can. And we'll take it out of our stacker. We want this collar to reach back about quarter, half an inch past our tie-in point, just basically to the point of where the hook point starts. I'm going to trim this deer hair nice and blunt here, so I can just lay it down on top of the shank here. Do a nice loose wrap, a second nice loose wrap, and then tighten down. That'll be our collar. Then what we're going to do is just push those fibers back. Take our thread forward here. And we're ready to spin a little bit of deer hair. We're going to use the same yellow deer hair. What I'm going to do is cut the tips off. So I just have the butt ends in the middle section of the deer hair. Nice loose wrap, second loose wrap, and then pull tight and let it spin around the shank of the hook, and then push it all back once again. Take the thread forward to the front half of it, pull it all back. And I like to push it even a little bit more. Push it as far back as you can. Then we're ready to do that step again. Trim off the tips. Nice loose wrap, second loose wrap, and then tighten, let it spin. And that second one is usually enough deer hair. It looks like I should have about enough to form my head, and then I just pull it all back. And I can whip finish. Try to pull all that deer hair out of the way if you can. Kind of requires using both hands with the whip finish. There we go. And then what we can do is we can trim this deer hair. I'm going to use a razor blade here, and I'm going to cut the bottom just flush. And what I'm going to do is just use a sawing motion here to trim that deer hair. Try not to nick any of the other materials. Then the top portion I'm going to trim with a slight rounded kind of curve, half moon curve to it. And to do that, I'm going to take my razor blade, and all I'm going to do is kind of bend it a little bit here with my fingers. And I'm going to have a slight upward angle to it. That'll kind of help give it that half moon shape. I want to trim it all the way back to basically where I tied in the collar. And to finish it, sometimes it's easier just to use the scissors. Hold the collar fibers out of the way. And we're going to trim the head with a slight angle to it. And that slight angle will make the fly wobble as it gets stripped back. Trim a little more here. Probably the hardest part is just trying to trim it nice and even. Takes a little bit of practice. I could probably be a little better at it, but there we go. Pretty good. Not too bad. I've tied better ones. That's basically all there is to the Zoo Cougar. You can see how I have that kind of angle to it, that bullet-shaped head. That'll make it wobble in the current. I could have packed that deer hair a little bit denser, spent a little more time on it, but you can kind of get the idea. And you can add a little bit of super glue to the head there, and that'll keep it from falling apart on you. And you can get all the materials for this fly at intheriffle.com.